What's going on, Law Nation? Welcome to the Passive Income Attorney Podcast, the best place for learning about the world of alternative passive investing so that you can practice when you want to and not because you have to. So if you're ready to kick that billable hour to the curb, start by going to attorneybydesign.com to download the Freedom Blueprint. This will also get you access to opportunities to partner with us on one of our next passive real estate investments. Today, let's talk about rare earth metals. Say what? No, we're not talking about gold and silver. We're talking about rare earth metals or elements like cerium and scandium and a whole bunch of other metals that I can't pronounce. There are actually 17 of them, in fact, and these metals are an integral part of technologies like smartphones and electric vehicles. Something like 60% of all rare earth metals are produced in China, which creates an interesting supply and demand dynamic that investors can take advantage of. In this episode, we're going on a crash course on investing in these metals, as well as the concept of geographic diversification. Louis O'Connor is the founder of Strategic Metals Invest, which offers private investors the opportunity to physically own and operate from holding strategic metals as tangible assets. Lou is Mr. Worldwide. He's tuning in from his home country of Ireland, has spent decades throughout Central and South America, and does business all around the globe, including right here in the US. All right, let's dive in.
This is the Passive Income Attorney Podcast, where you'll discover the secrets and strategies of the ultra wealthy on how they build streams of passive income to give them the freedom we all want. Attorney Seth Bradley will help you end the cycle of trading your time for money so you can make money while you sleep. Start living the good life on your own terms. Now, here's your host, Seth Bradley.
Lou, what's going on, brother? Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Seth. Great to be here. Hands across the Atlantic.
That's right. That's right. Where are you tuning in for our listeners that don't know?
I am in beautiful Tipperary in Ireland, west coast of Ireland.
There we go. The beauty of technology, right?
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty incredible. I think that's one great thing that did come out of the pandemic is just kind of the widespread acceptance of being able to communicate via Zoom. Because before it was just kind of weird, right? You're like, oh, we're meeting over the internet, we're meeting on video conferencing, and now it's just normal and accepted, and everybody does it. Yeah.
We've the technology was there, but I guess we're just really value it now and more than before. I mean, you can go anywhere, you can Zoom anywhere in the world.
Yep, absolutely, man. All right, well, let's jump into your background a little bit. I know you have an incredibly interesting background and your travels and all that. So, what's your story? Take it back as far as you'd like.
Okay, so yeah, I was born in Ireland, not in Tipperary where I am now. I was born in Dublin. During that time, well, when I grew up here, we still had a lot of, political sort of situation in the north of Ireland and sort of sectarian sort of warfare going on. No economic prosperity, a lot of emigration. So I sort of knew from, very early age, I wanted to get on the road. And, I mean, I think deep down, there's more going on in the world than throwing, bombs and stuff, So look, I wanted to see the world, and I did. I went to Germany first of all, and I spent about 8 years there, but traveling all throughout Central Europe at that time. That was before the euro, so all the borders were still up, and I lived in Germany. But if you crossed into France, you had the French franc there, and the Luxembourg franc, and the Dutch guilder, and now, it's all one economic zone and one currency. And then I landed in, I always wanted to go to Latin America. And I think in those early days, Seth, my priority was travel and adventure, and the greatest experience I've ever had and still have to this day is going somewhere I've never been before, whether that's, Krakow in Poland or Medellin in Colombia. You arrive somewhere and you head out the first evening, you walk around a corner and your sort of senses are on full alert, the smells, the sights, the sounds, everything is new. And to this day, that's still the biggest pleasure, joy I take in life. So I'm still traveling. I have a wife and kids now as well that keep me fairly the anchor has been thrown down for a while.
How did you get instilled with that passion for travel and adventure? It seems like I know that I wasn't. I was always interested, but I grew up kind of in a blue collar type of scenario, and in West Virginia, we're a little bit isolated there. So, but when I did finally get out, I studied abroad in Barcelona for a summer. And that was kind of like the eye-opening moment. That was late. I mean, that was when I was in law school when I did that. But it was, I was there long enough to kind of get engulfed by the culture a little bit, rather than just visiting for like a week or a few days or something like that. And it kind of opened your eyes, right? You see there's other ways to succeed, other ways that other cultures do things, and it's different from where you grew up, and it still works, right? And I think it just kind of opened your mind up to those sorts of things.
Yeah, I think you nailed it there a little bit as well, in the sense that Ireland is a small island. I mean, we're part of Europe, but we're on the western tip, and it's still an island. So it's probably no bigger than maybe West Virginia, yet you're now living in California, yet in a way you've actually traveled as well, although you're in the same country. I mean, the US is so, I think if I was born in America, I'd probably still be there finding new places. It's so big. And,
sure.
I mean, what country has Alaska, right? With the snow and the wilderness, one, and then you go all the way down to Florida, which has a tropical climate. So there's so much sort of there, but, Ireland was smaller, and that was part of it, you can drive across Ireland in about 3 hours, where you couldn't do that in America, right?
Yeah, for sure. So you had no choice. You had to get out. Had to get out and explore.
And glad I did,
Yeah. So you started traveling pretty early. Did you ever, and I know you're an investor and an entrepreneur now, but did you ever kind of get into, the normal corporate type of jobs at any point in time, or did you never kind of dive into that?
I did actually for the first 10 or 15 years, my 20s till I was about 35. I worked for a US company actually that had offices all over the world. And that actually did allow me, they had offices nearly in every country in Europe, the Middle East, Korea, Japan. And that did allow me to travel a bit. And that's sort of what brought me to Panama in Central America the very, very first time. And I sort of fell in love with Central America, Latin America, the Latin culture. And then I met my wife, my wife is from Mexico. She was born in Guadalajara, but she had moved with her family as well to Panama. And then I sort of stayed after meeting Daphne, my wife. And there's something special about Latin America. I mean, I've traveled a lot there, Colombia, Venezuela, then the Caribbean, the islands and stuff, and all of Central America. And there's something really special about the place. I can't quite describe what it is, but it's just very sort of adventurous and exciting to me, Latin America.
Yeah. How much time did you spend there?
20 years, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
It's a wonderful place. I mean, Colombia now, I don't know. Look, that's probably for another conversation. I'd be talking about travel all day, Seth. I'll let you continue. I'll let you go on. Keep going.
All good. I will mention that I have been to Colombia as well. And, when I booked that trip with my wife, people were family members were like, hey, you're going to go to Colombia? I'm like, yeah, it's fine. And it was. I didn't feel unsafe at any point in time. It was such a beautiful country. And we traveled all around there for a couple of weeks, and it was awesome.
Great stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah. So, you're in that corporate job. At what point did you kind of start having that aha moment? We always kind of look at those moments when you start thinking, maybe there's another way to make money. I need to start looking at investing in different sorts of things and start looking at alternative investments. Did you have an aha moment like that?
Do you know what I think, Seth? I think all sort of wisdom and sort of and wisdom meaning a mix of sort of intelligence and sort of compassion, I think comes from sort of failure and sustained sort of learning, and I suppose what I did, I was lucky enough that I did very well in my early 20s in Germany, and I was smart enough, or somebody was smart enough to tell me to buy some property. So I bought property in Ireland when I was very young, and before there was any sort of an economic boom here. So I'd started to get on the property ladder, and in a way, ignorance is bliss, because I didn't know much else. I didn't, Ireland, we hadn't had any economic prosperity. So you wouldn't hear people talking about investing in stocks and shares and stuff like you might in the US. We just didn't have that level of experience or know-how. So in a way, I started in a good way because I didn't know much, but I knew property was safe, and then what sort of propelled me out of that sort of corporate job was, and this is true. I mean, all sort of institutions, if you will, whether they're institutionalized religion or government or corporate environments, because they have one mission. That one mission is the survival and success of that organization. Then everybody who's a part of it, if you're not aligned with that one mission, you're going to do well, or you're going to leave. And to do well, I think, like if you look at most CEOs and most really successful people, there's something a little bit screwy there. If you want to, anyone that wants to rule the world, there's something a little bit, off, I think, So I just, after a few years in that environment, realized this is not the healthiest place in the world to be, because, people will sort of, throw people under the bus, or, when somebody wants to get to the top of the ladder, they'll just get there as fast as I can, and they climb over whoever they need to, Not to say there's not also good, healthy people there as well, but the very nature of an institution or a corporation fosters that environment, and still does today. So again, I suppose I wanted to get away from that, and the natural next step was to sort of foster my own self-reliance, independence, where I didn't have to, could make my own decisions, and I could stand by them whether they succeeded or failed. I just had that sole responsibility.
Yeah, I love that. And that's kind of one thing we talk about on this podcast all the time is kind of being self-sufficient, kind of creating your own economy by investing in alternative assets, creating your own companies, investing in businesses, things like that. So you're not so dependent on, that corporate job, whether that's a law firm or, a medical practice or whatever it might be, just so you can be independent and financially free.
Yeah, absolutely. And, since then, it's sort of permeated into all my life. I think if possible, we should be diversified in every way we can, like multiple passports, multiple residencies, and, do your banking in multiple jurisdictions, maybe have your business in one country and reside in another, because I think for full safety and diversification, it's always good to have sort of a plan B and a plan C. Now, I'm not sort of in any way doom and gloom about, the world's going to end or these countries are going to fail, but it's just great to have options, and the more options you have, the better, just in case one day you do decide you want a different climate or geographical move, whatever the case might be. It's good to have, those backups, to have a parachute in case you need it, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's something we haven't talked about on this show at all. And I think you call that geographic diversification, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So
I think it's important for example, I mean, I have a bit of experience with it, so I can share, but like Panama, for example, is one of them, arguably maybe the easiest country in the world to have a second residency and in 5 years a second passport. But what people wouldn't know about Panama is, one, it doesn't even, the only fee to do that is like the legal fee. So for between $3,000 and $5,000, you can have a residency in another country. The other thing is you don't have to be there all the time. Some countries, Colombia is one of them, Dubai is another. They sort of ask you, or if you want to keep your residency, you've got to be there 90 days or sometimes 6 months of the year. With Panama, you only have to be there 1 day out of every 2 years. And here's the kicker. All your worldwide income is tax-free if you're a resident of Panama. So you can be resident in Panama, spending most of your time traveling the world, and all your income outside of Panama is tax-free. Now, that's a little bit different for me because I'm a European, of a European passport, and like if I'm I can have an Irish passport, and if I'm out of Ireland more than 6 months a year, I don't have to pay any taxes here. Whereas if you're, unfortunately, Uncle Sam, has global taxation. I think one of only 2 countries in the world that do. So, I know from my fellow sort of American friends in Panama that they still have to do a tax return there. But there's a thing you can do. You can be a non-resident of the US, and you have a threshold. You can earn a certain amount. I think it's $90,000 or $100,000 a year, tax free, and then after that, you have to look at your taxes.
Interesting. Yeah, that's something to look into. So, are you still a resident of Panama?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Yeah. And maybe could you go into, how that geographic diversification kind of protects you from certain risks? I mean, you kind of touched on it, but maybe go in there a little bit further.
Yeah, look, I mean, anything can happen. I mean, who knows what the future holds, war, for example. I mean, look at Ukraine at the moment. And we have a Ukrainian family here, a grandmother, daughter, and young girl who are here. 6 months ago, they couldn't have dreamed they'd be in Ireland, right? Away from their family and stuff. But as well, let's suppose, the residency you're in, or the government administration you're in, just, I don't know, decided one day to go completely crazy and say, well, from now on, it's 80% tax because we need the money. When you have a backup residency and a backup passport, you'll be one of the few people that can make a choice on whether that's acceptable to you or not. So I think it just gives you that choice, I think the one or the last of the human freedoms that we always have, and even in really extreme situations, we always have a freedom to choose, right? And that's what I want to always maintain, is I want to always have a choice. If something is thrown at me from, exterior sources, whether it's tax, whether it's war, whatever it might be, I'd like to have a choice, a plan B and a plan C. And I think, again, I'm not sort of saying, leave America and go and live in Panama because it's better. No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying, look, if by chance one day, you wanted to leave, instead of having to look for a residency or look for somewhere to go, like even your trip to Colombia, I mean, now what Colombia is like. You have an idea, so that might be something you'd consider in the future. So just about giving yourself choices, really,
Yeah, I love this, man. I love this. So let's kind of change gears a little bit, but it's kind of related. Let's talk about your current business with rare earth metals and how that kind of ties into this idea of
Sure.
geographic diversification.
Yeah, and it does still, Seth, because like my last 10 years in Panama, I was based in Panama, but I was working sort of with businesses in Colombia, Nicaragua, Ecuador, Uruguay, Brazil at one point. So I was based in Panama, but my business was elsewhere, and I knew I wanted to come back to Europe for a while, but I didn't. The taxes are almost 50% here in Ireland, and I don't want to. I don't think I want to work and deal with that forever. So I was looking for a good opportunity. And my business is, although I'm in Ireland, my business actually is in Germany. My clients are in either United Kingdom, Australia, or North America. That's why I'm chatting with you. We've just started marketing in the US. It's a new asset class that I'm pretty much sure any of your listeners will not have heard before, because it wasn't available to private investors before. So it gives me that the business being in Germany again, it sort of allows me as well to do sort of travel and banking in different jurisdictions.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Tell us a little bit more about that business. What is it, and how can someone get involved?
Okay, so Seth, I'm going to tell you as quickly as I can, but if I tell you something and you get a question, interrupt me,
okay.
And so I can answer that question. Right?
Got it.
You're taking your whole audience right now. Do you know what I mean? So the first thing I would tell you to allow people to understand it, is it's exactly the same paradigm as owning gold or silver, except investors can purchase rare earth metals. So my company is called Strategic Metals Invest. Strategic metals is an umbrella term for technology metals, rare earth elements, rare earth metals, green metals now, so those, for example, indium is a rare earth. You couldn't swipe your phone without indium, right? There's about 12 different rare earths in indium. Now, until very recently, let me just backpedal one. The only real buyer or end buyer for rare earths are industry buyers, like, Apple Computers, Siemens, BMW, Tesla. They're the only buyers. So you're probably wondering, how can an investor participate in that? Well, my business partner in Frankfurt is an industry supplier. So 80% of what they do is they buy metals, mostly from China, because China is the dominant sort of market leader in rare earths, but from other places as well. So they buy metals and they resell them to industry buyers. So what they did, they've been doing that for 30 years. And about 12 years ago, they opened a side business, if that's what you want to call it, where they now allow private investors to purchase the same metals, store them safely, and then when they want to liquidate them, that same company will sell them for you. So they provide the exit as well. Now, here's the kicker before you can come in with questions, Seth. Rare earths have outperformed gold consistently for the last 5 years. I'll give you the numbers exactly. Gold has gone up 58% between 2017 and 2022. So it's gone up an average of a little over, 11% a year. Rare earths are going up between 35 and 40% every year. So they're very, very profitable. But you have to be very, very careful because we're the only industry supplier. And again, industry supplier is the key word. If we weren't an industry supplier, there's no point in doing this because you can't liquidate it, right? So we're the only industry supplier in the world that actually offers this option to private investors.
Got it. So we'll start kind of from the beginning here. I've got a ton of questions, but what are some of the most common metals, and what are the technologies they're using? You mentioned cell phones. Are there others?
Excellent. Good question. Yeah. Basically, in all modern technology, they're critical and sort of irreplaceable to all modern technology. Gallium, indium, rhenium. Also now, the reason they're sort of so profitable and will continue to be is because of sort of COVID-related disruption to the supply chain, but also now we're going through this unbelievable transformation over the next 5 to 8 to 10 years where 80% of global emissions come from how we power our daily lives. We're about to transform how we do that from our to electric cars, solar energy, wind power. So those are the green metals like dysprosium, praseodymium, praseodymium, dysprosium, neodymium. Yeah, those are mostly those. So other industries, wear medical devices, military applications, aviation. I mean, you name it. Rare earths are there. They're critical to how we live, basically.
Got it. And these are, all those things that you mentioned are, technologies that we're using more and more, right? We're not talking about dated technologies or dated uses. These are future uses and future technologies that we're kind of using right now and using more and more as we go along. Is it possible that these are replaceable in any way, or are these going to be it? I mean, you have to mine these rare earth metals to utilize these technologies moving forward.
Yeah, good question. Look, there's like what are the pros and cons, right? And there's always when sort of supply and demand are in charge, and that's all that's in charge here is supply and demand. There's always that risk of, well, what if they find a better metal for iPhones? Those are, those are realistic possibilities. The only thing I would say, though, if you look, once people do their proper due diligence and sort of investigation, what you'll find out is that China produces more than 60% of the world's rare earths. And they, without a doubt, are the dominant market leader in rare earths. As you mentioned, like the technology, like, for example, in the modern world, or maybe in the Western world where people have disposable income, people are still replacing their phones and devices regularly. Then we have all the sort of Brazil, Russia, India, China sort of delivering hundreds of millions of people into the middle class. They also want that more modern technology. So it's just because of the particularly what we call the oxides, the powdered form of rare earths. I mean, you might find they'll improve on the technology, but I don't see the metals getting replaced anytime soon. And if they do, it'll be with another rare earth, because they all have that malleable sort of performance where they can perform under very, very high temperatures, like nuclear reactors and jet turbine engines. But then also they can perform, in lower categories as well. So, yeah, it doesn't look like in the next 10 or 15 years anyway, there'll be any shortage of demand for rare earths. In fact, demand is increasing, and it's not gonna stop for a while.
Awesome. Where else are these actively mined? You said that 60% in China. Where else are they kind of produced from?
Right. Well, would you believe in the 1980s, 60% of the world's rare earths were produced in America, in the US. And to date, I don't think anybody's quite sure what happened, but one indication is the premier of China in 1987, Deng Xiaoping, made a very sort of a shrewd statement. He said, the Middle East has oil, China has rare earths. And was it that China somehow predicted, the rise in technology? I mean, I think everybody knew it was coming. Maybe they just saw, how astronomical that demand was going to be. So one thing China has is 50% of the world's rare earths, but at the moment, China also, because of their sort of years of experience since the 80s, they're about a generation ahead of the rest of the world. To give you an idea, there's one mine in the US producing rare earths, which is Mountain Pass in California. Now, all of the raw materials produced there are still sent to China to be refined. So any of the experts, I mean, like sort of academic experts, are what they're basically saying is between 2025 and 2030, when China reaches its sort of China's futures policy, which is to be domestically self-sufficient in 10 different industries. When they reach that, the West, meaning Europe and the US and other countries, will basically be standing in a line for what China will give after they've sort of, taken care of their own quotas and their own demands. Give you an idea, like 2 of our metals doubled in value last year, Seth. At the same time, China doubled their production of electric cars. So, whatever they do will happens in the rest of the world, But, to give you an idea as well, both in a very rare occurrence of agreement, both President Trump and President Biden both signed executive orders recognizing that America needs to wean its dependence of China. Now, Europe's the same, but just because you're in the US, I'm giving you the US. Europe's the same. We also are dependent on China. But both Trump and Biden signed these executive orders. So, the winds of change are occurring, but it took China a generation to get here. It'll take, I think, as long for the West to figure this out. And in the meantime, investors can profit. That's my, it doesn't matter to me whether people believe in climate change or not. The fact is we are going to these more greener energies, right? It doesn't matter to me whether people are sort of support or proponents of, or against China. I'm just talking about this purely from a pure investor point of view, which is, how can we, what's going on and how can we profit from it? And that's That's the reality right now. And the numbers are on, the numbers tell the truth, right? Rare earths are up 35% a year every year for the last 5 years. So that's all you need to know, right, as an investor.
Yeah, 35%. That's pretty impressive. But you can find these rare earths in other places. You can find them in the United States. You can find them in.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Although the name rare earths, some of them are not all that rare, but yeah, they can be found in Africa, in the US, in Europe, Australia. So yeah, they're not all that rare. What's interesting about them, Seth, is they're always found, they're always a byproduct of mining another raw material. So they're rare in the sense that they're they're in groupings, and they have to be, that's what China does so well with geology and science and maths, is how to sort of separate them and then sort of and retain those purity levels that are needed, But yeah, they can be found, like 50% of the world's reserves are in China. So the other 50% are in different locations, around the world.
Got it. Let's kind of dial it in a little bit. So do you guys buy these rare earth metals directly from miners with the investor funds, and then you store them and then sell them whenever the investors want to exit? Maybe go into that a little bit more, clean up my storyline a little bit.
Yeah, no, well, actually you got it about 70, 80, maybe 90% right, but it is very important to clarify. But no, you just about nailed it there. So very good for the first time round. Look, no, and I know it's true, because look, a lot of times when I start talking about rare earths, I could see people, their eyes sort of glaze over, and you've lost them in about 10 seconds. But you've picked up most of that there, which so good for you, So basically, 80% of our activities are buying and selling, to industry. So that has nothing to do with the investment side. But if we weren't an industry supplier, we couldn't do the investment thing. So it's sort of the most important thing about what we do is not the investment part. It's the fact that we buy from suppliers, from producers in China, and we sell them then to industry buyers. Just to give you an idea, in the vault in Frankfurt, we've more than 200 metric tons of inventory. Less than 20% of that is investor owned. Most of that is for industry buyers. So here's how it works. On a daily basis in the office, we're buying and we're selling metals. Like this morning, just looking before we came on, we've sold metals to a factory in Germany. We had an order in from Japan, and we've an order from Liechtenstein. So we're doing business in over 70 different countries. So that's what we do 80% of the time. And the investor obviously should be really, really happy that's what we do. Because if we weren't doing that, we couldn't offer you the opportunity to invest. So as a side business, and that's a bit small of a word for it now, but we created this side business in 2010. We bought what was an underground bunker, an air raid shelter in World War II, converted it to a bank level secure vault. And we've been offering investors, mostly in Germany, Austria, Switzerland, the opportunity to buy the metal. So let's just give you an example. Let's say you were buying, $100,000 worth of metals today. So we would send you an offer. You might say, Louis, I want to buy the metals that are all to do with modern technology. Give me those 5 metals. So we send you the metal with the purity levels and the analysis reports, the chain of custody. And once you accept the offer, you wire the funds directly to Tradium in Frankfurt, and then we order the metals. They'll take about a month to come in, maybe 60 days, between 30 and 60 days. And then when they arrive, we'll allocate them to the vault, to our storage facility in Frankfurt. And that's where they, and then we'll update, you've got your certificate of ownership, you've got your storage agreement, and we will update you weekly. Then you get a performance sheet, and you'll be able to see how each metal is performing and how your portfolio on average is performing. We recommend you own them for at least 1 year, because if it's a bonded tax-free vault, just like Switzerland. So if you've kept them a year, then there's no taxes, on the purchase or the sale. So although they're in a vault in Frankfurt, you own them. You've got to sit there, you own them, just like you would gold or silver. Now, some people, I had a client recently say to me, an older gentleman from the South in America, and he said, Louis, he had that Southern drawl, which I won't do, but he said, I like to keep my gold close to home, you know? And I think what he meant was buried out in the backyard, right? He said, so, you know, I'm not that comfortable with, you know, how in having them in Germany. So you need to sell me on that, you know? So, you know, what I said to him was, look, if you really wanted to, you can move your metals to, you know, America. They're your metals, you own them. However, all you're doing is adding cost to your investment, because you'd have to pay for the transportation from Frankfurt to the US. You'd probably have to pay import duties. And here's the kicker. In 5 years, when you come back to us and you want us to sell them, we'll happily sell them for you, but you'll probably need to have them retested, because they've broken out of the chain of custody. So, you know, if Boeing or Apple Computers or the US Department of Defense are buying gallium for an F-35, you know, jet engine, they need to know exactly where those metals have been all the time. And if they're out of the chain of custody, they have to be retested. So, you know, we recommend you store them with us because they stay in the chain of custody. But if you really, really weren't comfortable with that, you can move them to Switzerland, you can move them to the US, but it's just going to cost you.
Got it. That's interesting, man. You did a great job at explaining that. Like it's a lot more clear now how that works. You know, what are those tax things, those tax items and issues that we need to think about? You mentioned if you keep it in there for a year, you don't have to pay taxes on, you know, the purchase and the sale. Is that only with respect to in Germany or?
Correct.
Right.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, I'm an Irish citizen, and I can't, you know, for North America, you'd have to speak with your own, you know, tax advisor or, you know, accountant about sort of what's it called, capital gains and stuff. So yeah, I'm just speaking purely about purchase and sale in Europe. You'd be tax exempt.
Gotcha. Do you have recommendations? You don't have to say them on here, but just people in the U.S. that they could speak to about this. It is kind of an interesting and unique investment space, so it might need someone with some specific tax knowledge.
I do. We do have a list, and also for one client, or more than one, but recently we'd one who wanted to use a sort of in a 401k and do a self-directed IRA. So yeah, we can put you in touch with independents who can advise you or make suggestions there. But I suppose the easiest way to understand it is for anybody who's into gold or precious metals, the same rules apply. It's actually no different than buying gold or silver, whether you store them in Delaware or in Singapore or in Switzerland. It's the same. And with rare earths, it's exactly the same thing. You're buying a tangible asset, you own it, you take delivery in a, you know, you might store it in a vault elsewhere, but you're the legal owner of the metals.
Gotcha. And then I did hear you mention that you can diversify across a few different metals or a number of different metals, maybe in a, you know, these metals are with respect to or in connection to, you know, modern technologies with phones, and these are used in this. And you can say, I want to invest in, you know, $100,000 evenly across these 5 or 10 metals or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Good question. So there are 17 rare earths. We only offer 10 though as tangible assets. The other 7 are not all that rare and can be found in abundance. So, you know, there's no supply demand play there. And we focus very much on the remaining 10, 9 of which are critical to all modern technology, wind power, solar power, electric mobility, you know, the metals that are needed for the magnets for electric motors. So generally we recommend for somebody, you know, to buy all 10 metals to begin. The minimum investment is only $10,000, by the way, Seth. You don't have to be an accredited investor or anything. So for example, for like about $12,500, $13,000, somebody could start off with 1 kilo of every metal we offer. So they can have a nice sort of a stable base in the portfolio. And then over time, once you've made the first purchase, there's no minimum second or third. Like half of our clients are buying a second and a third time because the metals are going up in value. So you could start off with, you know, 13, 15, 20, $25,000 and build from there. You know, as I said, we update the prices weekly, so you can literally see every week how each metal is performing and what the average is for your portfolio.
Yeah. One last question before we get into the Freedom 4. What's kind of your general thoughts about the volatility, or what's the volatility of these metals? You know, we see, you know, a lot of us are familiar with watching gold and silver prices, or watching oil and gas prices, watching stocks and bonds, those sorts of things. How do these metals compare?
Well, anybody who sort of, if I was to try and give you a prediction now, I mean, it's pure conjecture, right?
Sure.
Nobody can tell the future. But the way I like to look at it is, I call it, and I think this is a real estate term, maybe from the US, which is a path of progress play, which is, if you look at the path to where you are today, I mean, if you look back 5 years or 10 years and look at the certainties, like the facts, what really happened there and what's likely to happen, say, over the next 5 or 10, then you should be able to, barring a war or, you know, an earthquake or a comet coming from outer space, you should be able to, you know, reasonably predict what might happen, you know. And with a little bit of digging, you'll find, and it's sort of hidden in plain sight, that, you know, what we've been discussing here is real, that China dominates this market and will do for the next 5 or 10 years. China's increasing demand at the moment, but demand for these metals, for electric, it's just, you can barely fathom. For example, for electric cars, right? Every car manufacturer in the world is going to be fully electric by 2030, right? You know, like the US Army just announced, they plan to field an all electric non-tactical fleet by 2035 and an all electric tactical fleet by 2050. So they're just, you know, supply cannot keep up with demand, and there's no easy quick fix for this. There really isn't. I mean, it's just every now and again these good opportunities come along, and this is one of them. You know, if people do their due diligence, they'll see that, you know. And proof of that is for the last 5 years, rare earths have outperformed the FTSE, the S&P, and precious metals by a long shot, like not by, you know, a small amount, by a long shot, you know. I mean, again, 35% a year. I would say my only suggestion to anybody investing is to be patient, to plan to be, like, if you really want to make some money, plan to stay in for 3 or 5 years and you'll see great returns.
Yeah. I love that this investment, that these metals, they have utility, right? I mean, you know, we value gold and silver and diamonds and things like that because we put a value on them and what we think of, you know,
Yes.
these things being valuable. But really, what's the value? They're not really used for anything. There's no utility, but these metals have utility.
That's it. And I'm glad you said that for me, Seth, because that's what you know, that sums it all up, which is rare earths have an intrinsic value. Gold and metal have an extrinsic perceived value. So that's it. I mean, you know, who doesn't want to buy an asset that's in demand, where demand is continuing to increase, supply is limited, and also subject to disruption? It's just a win-win. It's one of those rare win-wins. And also, you know, we are the only, you know, we couldn't do this in sort of metric tons or, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars. You know, we our ratio, you know, we've only a certain amount that we can do, you know, as well. Do you know what I mean? For example, you know, like say Volkswagen and BMW and Ford Motor Company, they won't come to us for rare earths. They're sourcing their own supplies. Volkswagen right now is trying to set up, you know, directly with producers. So we're a little bit below that, where, you know, we sell to industrial customers. Customers are, you know, like a factory, maybe there might be 500 people working there, and different things like that. So it's a little bit of a niche. You know, we wouldn't, you know, I won't be doing, you know, overly marketing either, because there's only a certain amount of clients we'll be able to sort of take on board, you know.
Right. I love it, man. Let's jump into the Freedom 4.
It's time for the Freedom 4.
What's the best thing you do to keep your mind and body healthy?
Meditation, spiritual practice.
Awesome. Awesome. Love that, man. With all your success, what is one limiting belief that you've crushed along the way, and how did you get past it?
That's a good one. I don't know if this is the right answer, but it's just keep going. It's a bit of a cliche, but just if you keep going, keep getting up every morning and putting one foot forward, you're going to go somewhere. And if you have an idea in your head where it is you want to go, you'll get there. I think we tend to, you see somebody who's successful and you tend to think they started here and they went here, right? No, it was more like this.
Yeah.
And we all encounter perceived and real setbacks, but what I've found has worked for me is I've always just kept going.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the one actionable step our listeners can do right now to start creating more freedom?
I think to thine own self be true. Sit down, have a chat with yourself. Doesn't mean you're nuts, right? Don't do it in public. No, just I had to at some point as well sit down and sort of decide who do I want to be? Like, what's the type of person I want to be? I think that came as a result of having left home and, leave different cultures and different environments and different values. But find out who it is you want to be, what values does that, entail? And just, just because if you're just true to yourself, you don't have to worry about anybody else, and everything else sort of falls into place after that, whereas if you're trying to please a family member or, maybe, I don't know, parent might want somebody, I'm a lawyer, you should be a lawyer, or, or particular culture, you might grow up in a town where everybody's Silicon Valley or sports. Find out for yourself what works for you. And then it's just all sort of falls into place, I think, after that, who it is you want to be,
Yeah, that's a great answer, man. I don't think anyone's put it that way before, but I love that. Last but not least, how has passive income made your life better?
Money basically buys you freedom. It doesn't make you happy. And it can also, in moderate, everything has to be sort of moderated. I mean, for me, I think I always use the analogy of like going to the gym, fitness. We need to be physically fit, spiritually fit, which means you should have a spiritual practice of some sort. And I'm not talking about God or religion there. I'm talking about a spiritual practice, emotionally fit and mentally fit, And I think if we can moderate all of them, look, we know money doesn't make you happy, because if that was true, all the millionaires would be happy and all the poor people would be miserable. It's a lot of times it's, I know, especially in Latin America, people I met that had the least amount of material possessions seem to have much more peace of mind than those with seemingly everything. So, I think, and we touched on it at the beginning of the conversation, Seth, which is, and I learned this from Viktor Frankl. He was a psychiatrist in Auschwitz, and he saw, the worst of mankind, and he wrote a book after called Man's Search for Meaning. And the key takeaway there's a lot of good takeaways, but the key one for me was, he said, everything can be taken away from a person, everything, except one thing. And that's our ability to choose which way we're going to go in any given circumstance. And he was so right about that, that we basically, I think freedom is knowing that no matter what happens, you have a choice of how you're going to respond to that or react. I think respond is a better word. We always have a choice. If you come across oppression, if you come across whatever it might be, you have a choice to how you respond to that. Martin Luther King and Thai Nhat Hanh, all the great teachers, Lord Buddha, Lord Jesus, Lord Hindu, would all sort of boil down to that one thing is, we have a choice in how we don't have a choice maybe about what happens to us, but we have the other, I suppose, another expression, I think it's John Kabat-Zinn, who's a US American Buddhist. He said, We can't stop the waves, but we can learn how to surf, you know? So it's just learning how to surf.
Yeah, that's perfect, man. I mean, yeah, we have a choice on how we see things and how we accept things. We have a pretty big problem with that in America with social media and kind of comparing what our lives look like to what other people's look like from afar. And, that brings up, makes us unhappy compared to, and I don't want to make generalizations, but kind of you mentioned in Latin America where people don't, certain parts of Latin America, people don't have all these material possessions, but they're way happier and they're in a better place in their lives because maybe they don't make those comparisons. Maybe they're not worried about those material possessions and all those sorts of things.
Yeah. Yeah. Do another American said something which really sounds very counterintuitive, but he said there can be great freedom in poverty, because you have nothing to worry about,
Yeah.
it's and like in the rural interior parts of Colombia and Panama, people there, materially, they don't have everything. But let me tell you, when you meet them, they have peace of mind. They don't have mortgages. They don't have credit cards. They don't have bills. They wouldn't know what an insurance policy is or a debt. But there's mango trees, they fish. There's, they only live day to day, and they don't need to worry about tomorrow because they know they have enough for today, and then tomorrow will be the same. It's very subtle thing to recognize, but when you see it, you see that sort of having too much is just more. It's just stuff to worry about,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Lou, this has been an awesome talk, man. Awesome conversation. Where can our listeners find out more about you?
Thank you, Seth. And I look forward to meeting you in San Diego or having you here in Ireland one day.
Absolutely.
We'll bring you. I'm looking forward to taking you for a swim in the Irish Sea,
Sounds cold, man. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, they'll hear you screaming back in San Diego. It's freezing.
Luke, where can our listeners find out more about you?
So the website is Strategic Metals Invest, or they can email me, Louis, Louis, at strategicmetalsinvest.com.
All right. Awesome, brother. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Seth.
Thank you. Louis O'Connor, ladies and gentlemen. Wow. That was a compelling show for me personally, that's for sure, as rare earth metal investing is definitely not something I was previously familiar with. Major key, taking advantage of short windows of opportunity is a key strategy to implement. Real estate is the foundation, it's the rock, but, and I'm always going to invest in real estate, first and foremost and always, but then you should also stay on top of trends and opportunities that can throw gas on the fire. Today, rare earth metals, cryptocurrencies, CO2 scrubbers are great examples of this. Keep your eyes open. All right, if you're ready for a change or ready to take action, partner with us on our next passive real estate deal. Go to passiveincomeattorney.com and join our Esquire Passive Investor Club. All right, kiddos, enjoy the journey.
Thank you for listening to the Passive Income Attorney Podcast with Seth Bradley. Do you want more ideas on how to generate multiple streams of passive income? Then jump over to passiveincomeattorney.com for show notes and resources. Then apply for the private Facebook community by searching for the Passive Income Attorney on Facebook. And we'll see you on the next episode.